What was the most a situation you ever had? Story 1. I was on a school trip to New York City and we were in a very crowded elevator consisting of people from my class and people from a class coming from another school. As we were going to my destination, the girl in front of me started backing up into my jungle. She was speaking to her friends. They thought that maybe it was unintentional since the elevator was so packed, so I tried my best to shift my leg so she wasn't straight up crushing my As I started to move around, she would move around with me in 8th grade. Me was having trouble keeping his hormones in check. Eventually, the elevator door opened and it let us all off as we were getting off this hour, walking with our friends. She turned around, smiled and winked at me, and proceeded to walk away with her friends. This all happened at the Holocaust Museum. Story 2. I went to a housewarming party back in the city where I went to college shortly after graduating. Because I moved out of town, I arranged with my friends to just crash in their couch when the party's over. Great time. Everyone gets pretty drunk, and a cute friend from college shows up also from out of town. Let's call her Marissa. Marissa is also planning to spend the night on the couch. It's a big old L shape, so there's plenty of room for both of us. I always had a bit of a crush on Marissa, but she's had a European boyfriend for the entire 2 years that I'd known her. He came to visit her for a few weeks, so I know him, and he's just an absolutely fantastic guy. I'd never try to hook up with Marissa, but if she makes moves on me, it would be hard to resist. The party winds down and everyone heads out and goes to sleep, and I'm about ready to knock out too. But Marissa says, now you have to watch the first episode of my favorite show, Shameless, which we had been chatting about earlier. So we start watching, get a bit cuddly, and I'm just enjoying myself in the show. We are well into the 2nd episode when Marissa gets up, walks in front of the TV, stares me in the eyes, and takes off her pants. I say, holy crap, Marissa thinks she just pulled the power move of the century. Snap back to reality. She starts to squad. And I realize this girl is drunk, sleepwalking, and about to pee on the floor. Again I say, holy crap, Marissa. I run over and get her to the bathroom, still laughing about it. A couple of years later, story 3. Got to see my boss's wife fully naked while taking a shower. I used to work at a restaurant and a colleague of mine slipped, spilling all the drinks over me as I was trying to catch her since my boss lived above the restaurant. He offered to take a shower upstairs to clean me up. I gladly accepted. However, this was never communicated to his wife, so she thought her husband was in the shower and decided to surprise him. So she's not going to the bathroom. It didn't have a lot. Got naked and pulled the shower curtains open in one quick motion while striking a pose. To her surprise, it wasn't her husband that was showering with me. I also happened to be facing the shower curtain as she pulled it open. We both froze for a couple of seconds and locked eyes. She closed the car in as fast as she opened it and apologized about 100 times on her way out of the bathroom. I just started laughing when she left and fully realized what had just happened. I finished my shower, went back downstairs, and told my boss what happened. He burst out laughing and asked if I liked what I saw. They answered with a yes, got a pat on the back, and just went back to work. Me and my boss, his wife, never talked about it, but my boss would sometimes tease his wife with it when only us 3 are present, got a say-baller move. Telling him straight up that you liked what you saw. Story 4. My neighbor locked herself out of her townhouse dorm over winter break. I was the only other resident living in the complex at the time. The resident assistant who had a master key bailed to his girlfriend's place 4 hours away, but wouldn't be back for another 2 days. That said, he may return sooner if we call the building director, or the neighbor will be fined $200 for losing our keys in the whom we all liked would be fired. Offered Lydia, the neighbor, the option of hanging out since it was a townhouse and there was room. She said she would hang out until she could find somewhere else to go and made a few phone calls that went unanswered. Ordered pizza and watched a movie that evening until she fell asleep on the couch and put a pillow under her head and a blanket over her. And went to bed. Woke up with her next to me in the morning, spent the next 2 days intermittently having sex, watching movies and making meals. She had this thing about hanging out in only t-shirts, underwear, and socks. It seemed like every meal prep was interrupted by us having to put things on the simmer and go have sex. Story 5. Best friend got married just after college. Got paired with someone at the wedding party I had never met. While driving this older Jewish grad student to the bride's parents' place to the after party, she remarks, "I'm glad you know how to drive a stick, because this is the only stick I can drive," and reaches over and grabs my junk for the rest of the ride. I got laid before the groom did that night. Story 6. I was on a date last week with a very attractive girl, great body, a gorgeous face, very hot. We're nearing the end of the dinner and we start talking about sex and another typical first date dinner conversation stuff. I don't know what I said, but she kinda just paused for a second, looked at me seductively and said, "Would you like to go back to my place and eat me out?" My jaw dropped. Never had that what happened before and probably never will again. Well, she's stupid because you just ate dinner. Story 7. The carpenter renovating my room thought I was gay. I'm a straight guy. We were alone in the house. I finished taking a shower and was only in my towel, and I innocuously analyzed his shirtless torso in all its glory, wondering what routine he's doing in the gym. Maybe I was staring too hard. He then approached me and tried to make out with me. I pushed him and laughed and said no. He said he thought I wanted to have sex with him with all the stares I was giving him. Lesson learned. To be more aware of how I am staring at people. Story 8. My roommate at the time and I were hosting some friends in our apartment. We both got pretty drunk and when everyone finally left, I was cleaning up and she had gone to bed. I got a text from her asking if I could come sit with her for a bit, and she felt dizzy for being drunk and could use the company. I go to her room and sit on a chair next to her bed. She's lying face down with a blanket over her, and we're just talking. She laughs and says, "You can sit on the bed, you know." So I move over and sit on the edge of her bed. This is when I notice she's naked under the covers. Story 9. Back when I delivered pizza, I was greeted at the door by a woman wearing the simplest of clothing, nearly completely see-through. I think she noticed that I was looking at her nipples, and she mentioned she and her husband were swingers. Asked me to come inside, but my anxious ass declined, so she just took off her top and gave me some cash. Reading this thread has made me realize how painfully boring my life is. Story 10. A while back I was doing some physical therapy and walking back and forth in some parallel bars. It was me, male, my therapist, female, and a trainee who was shadowing her for a few weeks. She needed to check that my glutes were properly activating as it walked, and he needed the experience to know what to look for. So I was slowly walking back and forth while they shuffled along behind me, a hand on each of my ass cheeks. The situation was normal and professional enough until another therapist, female, walked into the room in sort of frozen surprise, trying not to laugh. It was hard to deny the ridiculousness of it after that. Story 11 was on holiday in Ibiza in '99, staying in one of those god-awful concrete abominations designed to house loud, obnoxious British pricks on holiday. Sitting out on our balcony one evening, having some pre-night out drinks, and I can hear shouting. Look over and two women are waving and shouting from theirs. Turns out they closed their balcony sliding door and the latch came down, trapping them. They shout the room number and I go down to reception to tell the overworked, heavily harassed staff. They come up with me and they enter the room to let the woman out. I can't remember why, but me and one of the women went in the lift down to reception and then back up. It might have been to return a master key that the staff left with us. On the way up, this is maybe 3 minutes after meeting her. The woman asks, "Thank you so much. Whatever can I do to repay you?" I jokingly replied, "Well, we could always hook," and laughed. "Yes, absolutely," she replied. Heart racing and not sure she was joking, she took my hand and took me to her room. The room she had been locked in was her friend's, and we had sex. I was barely 19 and she was 25. Was a lot of fun. Story 12. With my ex-girlfriend. I'm female. We lived in a crappy bedsit, one big ash room, so I only had space for a double bed. This was all well and good until we had an electrician come around to sort the plugs. He was a youngish lad, around 21. We were only a couple of years older at this point. We didn't want to just hover around him, so we kind of half sat and laid awkwardly on the bed, trying to make small talk until I couldn't take it anymore and just said, "Well, this is the start of a lot of porn, isn't it?" Meaning nothing of it, but thought it was funny and awkward, and I can't stop myself from saying dumb crap. Cue my girlfriend looking at me and trying not to die laughing. And this poor kid stopped everything he was doing, stared at me, turned bright red, and nearly broke his neck, turning his head back to the plugs. And we spent the rest of the time with such a weird or awkward tension in the room, with a few strictly professional things from him. Story 13. I became friends with this lesbian couple, male here. After a few weeks they asked me if I wanted to go to their house. They were super straightforward and said they were looking for friends with benefits and boyfriend kind of a deal, and that they have chosen me. I said yes, of course. After a few weeks of some amazing encounters, I started to develop feelings for one of them, and a few days later the other one started to notice it and got jealous. Finally, this girl I fell in love with confessed she was in love with me, so she broke up with a girlfriend. Our date didn't last long enough, and that, kids, is the story of how I managed to screw up with a steady threesome relationship. Story 14. That was how sitting for a woman who was having her backyard redone, I don't remember what. But it was warm and I was just hanging about watching TV. One of the workers knocked on the back door. I went to answer it. Dude looks at me and starts smiling from ear to ear. We have a little conversation and close the door. I look down. The house dress I was wearing was basically showing my whole bra. A lacy one. I gave him one hell of a show. Oops. Story 15. So, this was my math professor at college. I was a good student. Once I asked her a question in class, she says to me, "You shouldn't wait for me to come into the class to ask the question. You can come into my cabin." So this happened some 3 to 4 times. One day I was stuck on a question, so I visited her cabin and knocked on the door. She saw me and asked me to come inside. She says, "So which question is it?" I proceeded to ask the question, but I was distracted because she was working on her makeup or something. That scent in the air was turning me on. Trust me, I had never seen her that way. She smiled and asked if I had any girlfriend. I said no. Then she proceeded to ask, "Do I look good to you?" I hesitated at first, but then said yes. Then I asked her to help me with a question. She helped me, then as I was going from there, she said, "You can come here any time." Now, when I look back at that incident, I think, what the hell was that? However, one of my friends claimed to have hooked up with her. Story 16. I was friends with a girl in high school. We both had the same math teacher 2 years in a row. This teacher always treated students alphabetically, so she always sat right in front of me. We became good friends over those 2 years and would pass notes back and forth during class. I had a pretty big crush on her, but she had a boyfriend that she'd been with for those entire 2 years. I didn't want to be one of those guys that hit on a girl in a relationship, so I didn't. I just flirted a little in our notes. Now I'm an artist, and even back then, I was always drawing, so a lot of our notes had doodles I drew all over them. One day we're lightly flirting in our notes when she writes to me something along the lines of, "You're such a good artist, we should do that Titanic thing sometime," referring to Leo drawing Kate nude in Titanic. She was basically inviting me to draw her nude, and if she really wanted to stick to the movie, we'd have sex in the car afterward. At that point, I'd never had sex or even a real girlfriend, so I'm pretty sure I just replied with something like, "Yeah, it would be cool to draw you sometime." We never followed up on it. I was too insecure to pursue it, and she never went further than to keep saying we should do that sometime. I don't regret it, because I met the woman who is now my wife soon after. But it's interesting to think how close I got. Story 17. One that I still kick myself for. I work as a gardener, so I'm halfway there already. But at one of my former sites, there was an older woman who lived there. She was late 40s, early 50s, but had aged like fine wine, with a great body, a lovely face, and an attractive personality that made you feel easy around her. She'd jokingly flirt all the time too, which to then 21-year-old me had me real hot under the collars. One day I was using some rope for a job and she asked if I could help her move something heavy in her apartment. Me being the guy that I am, I agreed. So I went into her apartment with a rope still in hand, moved the stuff for her, and she took notice of my robe, crossed her dress over and said, "Oh, is that for me, sir?" Or something like that whilst giving me now what I know as the look. I chuckled but left the apartment where I immediately realized that I had an opportunity to playfully ramp up the flirting and see where I went. I was young and inexperienced, but in hindsight she all but handed me a condom and I used it as a balloon to float away instead. Alright, your last sentence is just incredible. Story 18. I hooked up with my friend's mom when I was 19 or 20. It was absolutely as awesome as I'd been imagining it since I hit puberty. So basically, me and a few friends around my friend's house drinking one night. We were all under the impression that his mom was gone for the night. When it came time to pass out for the evening, instead of opting for the cramped love seat in his living room or on the floor, I decided I'd just crash on his mom's bed instead. Well, 30 or so minutes later, the door creaks open and she turns on the light. No big deal, really. I explained why I was up there and began to excuse myself, not even really thinking anything of it. Then she says, "No, it's okay, I don't mind if you stay." Instant boner. She then undressed right there in front of me and put on one of those silk nightgown type things and crawled into bed next to me. I'm pretty well frozen with excitement and fear. Apparently she recognized that. We just went for it, reached over and slid her hand down my stomach and inside my shorts. After that, I snapped my brief paralysis and handled business. Afterward, I excused myself downstairs so as to not raise anybody's suspicions in the morning. How did Stacy take the news? Story 19. My friend and I were hanging out in his apartment rooftop one summer night drinking. We ended up talking to this group of girls, one of whom was very petite and in a bikini since there was a pool there. We were talking for a while before this random lady and cameraman showed up and asked if we would be willing to be interviewed for a documentary she was filming on millennials and their views on the world or something. My buddy and I agreed, and she also convinced the girl to join too. So they sat the three of us down on this couch and made her sit in the middle. It was badly lit. We're all a little buzzed, and the director kept making us closer and closer together until this poor girl was basically sitting in our laps. As we were filming and she was asking us these vague questions, I realized how this must look on tape. Me, a bigger kind of heavy white dude with a full beard, this tiny white girl in a bikini, and then this short but toned Indian man with a beard, in some kind of awkward sandwich in the couch in poor lighting. I just knew it looked like the casting couch for an interracial porn. Story 20. I was at a party. It was pretty late. I was tired and drank too many beers. This led to really bad hiccups that, despite trying all the methods my friends were suggesting, couldn't go away. I decided to leave the party and go to bed as it was really starting to get painful. On my way home, I stumbled upon two pretty girls from the party, completely wasted. They asked me where I lived, and as it turns out, one of the girls lived near me. Great. One of the girls said staggeringly, "You can walk us home. She's going to stay at my place tonight." And so I did. Upon arriving at their destination, the two girls started to take me by the hand to come up with them. I was extremely tired, drunk, and these damn hiccups weren't going anywhere. So I politely declined. "I'm sorry, I'm going to go home. Come on, come with us. You're not fun. We like you. We want to have fun." I simply walked away. I didn't care at that moment. I just wanted my bad, but boy, I still hate myself for losing the opportunity to win the belt. Story 21. Years ago, my parents were not really happy with my sister after she came out as gay, so she wasn't invited to Thanksgiving. To support her, I went to her gay orphans, Thanksgiving with her friends instead of my parents. While there, I met this woman who I got along with really well, but I figured she was, well, a lesbian. Later, we were washing the dishes, and she said, "I think we're the only two straight people here." I go, "I think so," she says. "I think that means we have to hook up." We did. Story 22. I was once in the bar hopping college as part of our town with my friends. I was just getting over a bad breakup. Engagement ended. And was going crazy, drinking and dancing. I had brought plenty of 1-ounce shots in those bottles, as you can buy from the liquor store. It was a 10 for 10 kind of deal, and used them to get myself drunk without spending any money. Needless to say, I started eyeing a random girl I saw dancing on the floor. She was with a guy, but they didn't seem too close. Rather, more like friends. This friend of hers, mind you, were super drunk. So she buys him another drink and I offer to buy her one, but she didn't want one. Turns out he's a co-worker of hers, but they're not together. I thought that was it, until she went back to dancing and my drunk self went up to goof off and dance in front of her. Somehow, 45 seconds into dancing, we started making out. That went on for a few minutes with my friends filming and laughing until they eventually left us alone. We both agreed we needed to release this frustration we have for each other, so we walked out of the bar and went on to an alley that was right next to the bar we were in. I felt so badass, I winked at my friends and said to go on without me. In the alley we started making out and I stuck my hand in her pants. I somehow made her come real quick, just a minute or two, just by playing with her. Suddenly she asks if I want a blowjob. Mind you, we're in public in the middle of this alley, though there's no one else there. She unzips my pants and starts giving me a blowjob in the middle of the alley. Meanwhile, it turns out there's a back entrance to this bar, and people start walking in the alley in order to get to the back entrance, walking past us. Everyone pretended like we weren't there. It was funny. That might have been the craziest, most risky experience that was as close to porn as it gets. 10 out of 10 would debate doing it again. Afterwards, I got her number. Turns out she was Irish and visiting for the week for work and was leaving the next day and expected something to happen the next day because she was fairly sober. I texted her the next day but never got a response.